The Van Wyck estate was the kind of mansion people whispered about. Tall white columns, endless halls of imported marble, and secrets hidden behind every antique door. The kind of place you didn't belong in unless your name was printed in a society magazine, or stitched on a maid's apron. Grace Alston clutched the small black bag she'd carried since the shelter. A van dropped her at the gates. No escort, no smile. Only the housekeeper, Mrs. Hall, waited at the front entrance. "You're late," Mrs. Hall snapped, though her eyes softened once she took in Grace's tired face. "Come inside. We don't stand on ceremony here, unless it's for the Van Wicks." Grace followed her into the grand foyer, where chandeliers shimmered like cages for light. "This is your uniform," Mrs. Hall said, handing her a folded set. "You're to clean the east wing, handle kitchen duties, and stay out of the nursery unless instructed." "Understood." Grace nodded quickly. "Yes, Miss Van Wyck does not tolerate gossip, eye contact, or familiarity." Grace swallowed. As she climbed the servant stairs to her room, she whispered to herself, "You're just here to survive, Grace. Nothing else." But her instincts murmured another truth. She'd been in this house before. Grace first saw the children on her third day. It was just after lunch. She'd gone to the kitchen to scrub the silverware when a giggle echoed down the hallway. Then another. The laughter of children. Light, free, out of place in such a cold house. She peeked around the corner. Two small figures, a boy and a girl, maybe 6 years old, sat cross-legged on the floor, stacking toy animals. Their matching auburn curls bounced as they laughed. Grace smiled. Something stirred inside her chest, warm, aching. Then she saw the girl staring directly at her. "Hi," the child said, boldly. Grace stepped back instinctively. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "Are you new?" the boy asked. "Yes," she said softly. "I'm Theo." "She's Ava." He grinned. Ava stood up. "You smell like pancakes." Grace laughed, surprised. "I haven't made pancakes in years." "I like you," Ava said. "You feel like—" She paused. "Like before." "Before?" Just then, a shrill voice pierced the hallway. "Ava! Theo! Where are you?" Lillian Van Wyck appeared in a navy silk robe, heels clicking like claws. When she saw Grace standing beside the children, her entire body stiffened. "What is the maid doing near my children?" she demanded. Grace bowed her head. "Apologies. I was just—" "I don't care what you were doing. Kitchen. Now." Grace scurried away, heart pounding, but not from fear. It was from the strange way the children had looked at her, like they already knew her. That night, Grace stayed late to mop the ballroom floors. The moonlight streamed through stained glass, painting the floor in soft colors. As she worked, she hummed a lullaby, one she hadn't sung in years. She didn't realize her eyes were wet until she tasted salt on her lips. A sudden creak. She turned to find Ava and Theo standing barefoot in the doorway. "How do you know that song?" Ava asked. Grace froze. "What?" "That song," Theo said. "You used to sing it when we were little. We remember." Grace dropped the mop. "No, I don't think so." "Yes," Ava whispered. "You smell the same, too." Before Grace could respond, Lillian's voice rang out from behind them. "What are you two doing out of bed?" The twins flinched. "We heard the music," Ava said. Lillian's eyes shot to Grace. "You out of my house." Grace's voice trembled. "But—" "Go to your room. Now." Lillian swept the twins away like glass dolls, and Grace stood alone in the ballroom. The next morning, Grace was summoned. Mrs. Hall led her down a velvet-lined hallway, stopping before a tall double door. "She's in one of her moods," Mrs. Hall whispered. "Keep your answers short." Inside, Lillian sat at a white grand piano, not playing, just staring into its open keys like they were a trap. "Miss Alston," she said without turning. "I assume you know your place here." "Yes," Grace said softly. "I don't know what kind of sob story got you this job, but this house runs on silence, not sentiment." "Yes, my children are delicate, sensitive, and easily manipulated." Grace's fists clenched at her sides. I see the way they look at you, Lillian continued. You're not their friend. You're not their family. You are staff. Do you understand? Grace hesitated. Yes, Lillian finally turned. Cross another line, and you'll be back on the street where I'm sure you belong. Grace left the room with her heart pounding and something else. Fury, buried deep, but alive. Later that week, Grace was assigned to clean the playroom for the first time. Lillian had taken the children to the city for piano lessons. The mansion was quiet. Grace dusted the bookshelves, adjusted pillows, and began sweeping near the window seat when her foot bumped something solid under the bench. A drawer. She tugged. Locked. But the hinge was old. With a careful pull and a twist, it popped open. Inside were drawings. Crumpled. Torn. One was of a woman holding 2 babies. The face was unmistakable. It was her own. Heart racing. She dug deeper. A faded photo. A hospital bracelet. And then her breath caught a birth certificate, or what was left of one. Part of it was blacked out, but the name Grace A. remained. Suddenly, it hit her. The hospital, the delivery, the crying babies, flashes, images. She dropped to her knees, gripping the edge of the drawer. These weren't just the Van Wyck's children. They were hers. The hallway was silent, bathed in a pale, bluish dawn. Grace stood outside the nursery door, the crumpled birth certificate still folded in her apron pocket. Her thoughts a storm. She didn't sleep last night. Couldn't. That image in the drawing, the woman with her face, holding 2 babies, and now this evidence. Something was wrong. Something big. She nearly collided with Mrs. Hall at the top of the servants' stays. Oh! Grace gasped. Mrs. Hall steadied her. You're trembling. I was just... Grace hesitated. Do you know who used this playroom before the twins? Mrs. Hall looked her in the eye, then passed her, as if calculating. Why do you ask? I found something. A photo, a bracelet, and a birth record. Mrs. Hall's expression changed ever so slightly. What did it say? Grace took a chance. My name. The housekeeper went still. Then she gently pushed Grace into a side room and shut the door. You shouldn't have found that, she whispered. You shouldn't even be in this house. I need answers, Grace begged. Please. Mrs. Hall's eyes softened, just slightly. 6 years ago, you arrived here in an ambulance. You were heavily sedated. There were rumors about surrogacy, rumors about Lillian not being able to conceive. Grace's heart pounded. Was I the surrogate? Mrs. Hall's voice dropped. You were more than that. You were their real mother, Grace. But they didn't tell you. You disappeared after birth. Grace's knees buckled slightly. Edward and Lillian took the babies, told the world they adopted through a private donor. You were written out of history. The lullaby still echoed in the air, unfinished. That night, as Grace sat by the small window in her servant quarters, trying to calm her breathing, a knock startled her. The door creaked open. Edward Van Wyck. Grace stood quickly, confused. So. He walked in slowly, dressed in a velvet robe, his expression unreadable. I heard you were asking questions. Grace's throat tightened. I just was curious about old photos in playroom. He sat down uninvited. You've been here, 3 weeks? And you've managed to get under my wife's skin and into my children's hearts. Grace clenched her fists. They came to me. I didn't force anything. Edward gave a short laugh. They always had strange instincts. But this is inconvenient. Inconvenient. Grace repeated. I found a birth certificate. His face changed, and I remember the hospital. Bits and pieces. It's coming back. Edward stood. Grace, listen to me. You've been through trauma. Years ago, you suffered a psychological breakdown. You were unstable. No, I wasn't. You were. We have the reports. Then why did you hire me? She snapped. He hesitated. Because I didn't want you on the streets, he said quietly. I owed you that much. His face moved closer. You're lucky. You've been given peace. Don't ruin it." He turned and left, leaving her shaking with rage and confusion. The next day, Grace left the estate under the pretense of picking up cleaning supplies. In truth, she took a cab to the city's central hospital. She held the hospital bracelet in her hand, worn and faded. Grace A. 0314, RM407B. At the records desk, a kind nurse looked over her ID. "This room's file is sealed." "Please," Grace said. "I was a patient. 6 years ago. I just need to know." The nurse hesitated. "One moment." She disappeared into the back. Grace waited, heart in her throat. When the nurse returned, she slid a thin folder across the desk, wrapped in yellow legal tape. Inside, a page with her name, her blood type, her psychological status, and one haunting phrase. Patient was sedated after delivery. No postnatal contact. Guardian requested minimal post-care interaction. No name listed. Just Guardian, EV. Edward Van Wyck. Grace's hands trembled. Her voice cracked. "They drugged me and took them." She stumbled outside into the sunshine that suddenly felt like a lie. That evening, Grace returned late and slipped through the servants' entrance. She was halfway up the back stairs when a voice stopped her. "Where were you?" Lillian stood at the top, a glass of wine in hand, eyes bloodshot. "I had an errand," Grace replied. "With whose permission?" Lillian's voice rose. "You vanished for hours, and now you think you can come and go." "I needed fresh air." "You think you're special, don't you? The way they look at you, the way they run to you. Ava told me you smell like love. What is that?" Grace met her eyes. "Maybe it's because I love them." Lillian's face twisted. "No, you want to steal them from me, just like you stole that lullaby. That voice, that bond. I didn't steal anything." Lillian slapped her. Hard. Grace reeled back, stunned. "I built this family." Lillian shrieked. "You're just a shell of the girl who got lucky." The twins appeared in the hallway. "Mommy," Ava said quietly, looking not at Lillian, but at Grace. Lillian turned slowly. "What did you just say?" Theo clung to Ava's sleeve. "We mean the other mommy," he said softly. Lillian dropped her glass. It shattered. After the incident, Grace was locked in her quarters for the night pending review. Her meals were slid through the door. But at midnight, her door creaked open. Mrs. Hall entered quickly, eyes nervous. "You need to leave," she whispered. "I can't," Grace said. "Not until I know the whole truth." Mrs. Hall looked around, then sat on the edge of the bed. 6 years ago, you were a surrogate, or that's what they told you. Lillian was obsessed with becoming a mother, but she couldn't carry. She and Edward found you, a desperate young woman in a clinic. No family, no record. You were perfect. Grace's eyes filled with tears. They told you it was IVF, but they used your real eggs, your real DNA. You carried your own babies without consent. Grace covered her mouth. And after the delivery, they sedated you. You were sent to a private rehab under Edward's name. Records were scrubbed. "I never agreed to that," Grace whispered. "I know," Mrs. Hall said, holding her hand, "and I should have spoken up, but I was scared." Grace stood slowly. "Not anymore." "I'll help you," Mrs. Hall said, "but you have to be smart. You're not fighting for a job anymore. You're fighting for your children." Grace didn't sleep after Mrs. Hall's confession. She packed her small bag at 4 a.m. The sun hadn't risen. The house was silent, but her heart thundered like a war drum. She left through the servant's door with just a hospital bracelet, birth record, the children's drawing, and a burner phone given by Mrs. Hall. One number saved, Lawyer Jenna Locke. She dialed. A woman answered. "Locklaw." "I think I was tricked into giving away my children," Grace whispered. "I need help." "Where are you?" "A motel near Westvale." "Don't talk to anyone else. I'll be there by noon." Grace ended the call and collapsed on the edge of the bed. Across the city, at the mansion, Lillian screamed when she discovered Grace gone. She ran. Lillian shrieked at Edward. She took something. Edward rubbed his temples. We warned her. She's going to expose us, she whispered. We need to stop her. What do you want me to do? Send men after her? Lillian looked him dead in the eye. I want her erased again. Ugh. Gray sat in Locke and Associates, a warm but modest firm in the city. Jenna Locke, mid-30s with sharp eyes and sharper instincts, flipped through the documents Grace had brought. You've been lied to, used, and buried, Jenna said. But that ends now. Grace clutched the drawing the twins had made. I don't care about revenge. I just want my children. Jenna nodded. Then we start with irrefutable proof. A court-ordered DNA test. Will the Van Wicks allow it? They won't have a choice. 2 days later, the court summoned Edward and Lillian for an emergency hearing regarding custody and identity fraud. Grace stood in the hallway, hands trembling, wearing a plain navy dress. Edward arrived in a three-piece suit. Lillian wore sunglasses in contempt. As they passed Grace, Lillian whispered, "They don't even remember you." Grace didn't flinch. Inside, the judge, a stern woman with silver hair, listened as Jenna presented evidence. This isn't a custody battle, Jenna said. This is a reclamation of identity. My client was misled, sedated, and erased after giving birth to twins who are genetically hers. Edward's lawyer objected. There's no proof. We request a DNA test, Jenna said. Immediate. The judge nodded. Request granted. Lillian stood. This is harassment. Sit down, Mrs. Van Wyck. The judge snapped, or I'll hold you in contempt. Grace exhaled. Step 1. Done. 3 days passed. Grace waited outside the courthouse with Jenna. Her fingers trembled as she held a warm coffee she hadn't touched. Across the parking lot, Lillian paced like a caged lion. Edward sat in their black SUV, motionless. Jenna emerged with a folder in hand. It's time. Inside the judge's chambers, all party Saturday. The judge opened the results. Based on certified testing, Miss Grace Olson is a biological mother of Ava and Theo Van Wyck. There's a 99.9% DNA match. Silence. Grace's breath hitched. She pressed a hand to her heart. The judge continued. The children's listed mother, Lillian Van Wyck, shows no biological relationship. Lillian's face flushed red. That test is rigged. Edward's lawyer muttered, Don't, Lillian. You manipulated it. You seduced my husband. You conned your way in. I gave birth to them. Grace shouted, finally breaking. You stole them. The judge banged her gavel. One more outburst, and I clear the room. Grace inhaled deeply. They are mine, and I want them back. 2 days later, Edward showed up at Grace's temporary apartment uninvited. Grace opened the door halfway. What do you want? He looked tired, defeated, but still dangerous. I want to talk. She didn't move. I didn't plan it like this. Lillian was unstable after our first miscarriage. When the doctor said she couldn't carry, she spiraled. She wanted to keep the family name going. The status. I told her surrogacy might be an option. And I was your option, Grace said bitterly. She picked you. You were perfect. No ties. Alone. But you were never supposed to find out. Grace's eyes stung. You lied to me. You took advantage of me. I tried to protect you after. I paid for your care. I made sure you were safe. You locked me away, Edward. He looked away. I never stopped thinking about them, Grace said. And when they looked at me again, they knew. I want to make this right. No, she said firmly. You don't get to make it right. You get to watch me raise my children. She shut the door. The media caught wind of the story the next morning. Headlines exploded. Nanny is the real mother. DNA bombshell destroys elite Van Wyck couple. Twins taken at birth. Real mom fights back. Van Wyck scandal trends across social media. Paparazzi surrounded the estate. Protesters stood with signs that read, Let Grace have her kids. Lillian threw a vase across the living room. They want to paint me as a monster, she screamed. Edward rubbed his forehead. We are done, Lillian. She blinked. What? I'm filing for divorce. I should have done it years ago. She laughed, shrill and bitter. You're leaving me for her. I'm leaving you because I can't breathe with you. Later that evening, Edward's publicist released a statement. Mr. Edward Van Wyck acknowledges Grace Alston as a biological mother of Ava and Theo. He supports an open custody dialogue and has filed for legal separation from Mrs. Lillian Van Wyck. Lillian watched the report in her bedroom. Alone, her reflection stared back from the black TV screen. And for once, she saw what everyone else finally did. Not a mother, not a wife, just a woman who built her world on stolen things. The courtroom was packed. Reporters sat shoulder to shoulder in the back rows. Cameras flashed as Grace Olson stepped forward, dressed in a modest beige suit, her hair tied back. Jenna Locke, her attorney, stood beside her like a lioness ready to pounce. At the opposite table, Lillian wore all black, a veil over her eyes, as if mourning something that hadn't died yet. Her lawyer, a cold-eyed man named Warren Steele, looked confident. Judge Harmon entered, slamming her gavel once. Let's begin. Jenna stood. Your Honor, we are requesting immediate custody of Ava and Theo Van Wyck on the grounds that my client, Grace Alston, is a biological mother, as proven by DNA. Furthermore, the opposing party obtained custody through manipulation, deceit, and emotional abuse. Objection! Warren snapped. That's conjecture. Sit down, Mr. Steele. The judge said, her voice like thunder. Continue. She nodded at Jenna. Grace took the stand. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with each sentence. I was 21 when I was approached with what I believed was a surrogate opportunity. But they lied. It was my egg, my DNA. I gave birth to them and woke up 3 days later in a psychiatric facility. The courtroom gasped. I never signed over rights. I never consented to adoption. I was stolen from. Jenna approached the bench with photos of the drawing, the hospital bracelet, the sedative files, and the blacked-out birth certificate. Your Honor, Jenna said, this was never surrogacy. This was erasure. Next came the bombshell. Jenna called Mrs. Hall to the stand. Tell the court what you witnessed the night of Grace's disappearance. Mrs. Hall looked uneasy but steady. After Grace gave birth, she was heavily sedated. I overheard Lillian telling Edward to take care of her before she remembers. They wanted to keep the babies. They knew Grace was a real mother. Jenna passed the next piece of evidence to the judge, a sealed psychiatric report from the private hospital. Judge Harmon read it aloud. Patient showed no signs of psychosis. Sedatives were administered preemptively per third-party instruction. Jenna added, the third party was Edward Van Wyck. Lillian finally lost control. She's a liar. This is all lies. She abandoned them, and I saved them. Order, the judge barked. But it was too late. Cameras were rolling, and the internet was already exploding. Jenna spoke calmly. Mrs. Van Wyck, how do you explain the children calling Grace Mommy? Lillian hissed. Because she poisoned them against me. Is that why you slap her in front of the staff? Jenna asked. Gasps again. The court security video was played on screen. Lillian slapping Grace, the children crying. Jenna ended the session with a final statement. Grace isn't stealing anyone's children. She's taking back what was stolen from her. 3 days later, the final ruling was announced. The courtroom was silent as Judge Harmon spoke. In light of the overwhelming evidence, the court rules in favor of Miss Grace Alston. Full custody of Ava and Theo is granted. Mrs. Van Wyck is to undergo a psychological evaluation before being permitted supervised visitation, pending further review. Lillian screamed, You can't take them from me. Security approached. They're mine, she shrieked, thrashing as it pulled her back. She's nothing. Nothing. Grace sat frozen. Then the children entered the courtroom with a social worker. Mommy! Ava cried, running straight into her arms. Theo followed, burying his face in Grace's coat. She held them tight, tears falling freely. Judge Harmon smiled gently. Case closed. Outside, the press surged, but Grace shielded the children. Jenna flanked her. How does it feel? A reporter called. Grace looked down at her twins. like I've woken up from a nightmare. 6 months later, the Van Wyck estate had been sold. Lillian was in a private facility, and Edward was rarely seen in public. His business empire had fractured under the scandal. Grace now lived in a cozy countryside home with a yellow swing in the backyard. It wasn't a mansion, but it was home. Ava painted in the living room while Theo helped Grace bake cookies. Laughter, warmth, safety. That night, Grace tucked them into bed. "Tell us the real story," Ava whispered. "The one about how you found us." Grace smiled. "Well, once upon a time, there was a brave little girl and her brother who were taken to a big, scary house. But even in the dark, their hearts remembered something warm, someone kind, and that someone never stopped searching." Theo blinked. "Was that someone you?" Grace kissed his forehead. "Yes, baby, it was me." One chilly evening, just before the first snow, Grace heard a soft knock on the door. She opened it slowly. Edward stood there, older now, humbled. He held a thick envelope. "It's not a threat," he said. "It's everything. The contract, the hospital records. I want to give you the full truth." Grace didn't take it. "I don't need more papers, Edward. I already have what matters." He looked behind her, where the twins played with paper snowflakes by the fire. "I miss them." "They don't miss you," she said gently. "And that's the price of what you did." He nodded. "I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry." She didn't slam the door. She simply said, "Goodbye, Edward." She closed the door. Inside, Ava looked up. "Who was it?" "Just a ghost," Grace whispered, smiling. "And we don't open the door to ghosts anymore." She sat beside them, wrapping an arm around both. Outside, snow began to fall. Inside, peace finally reigned. Fade to black.